Huge case isn't it?
Now, and I know we've spoken a lot about hypothyroidism, the thyroid glands, etc., etc. But is it possible that I can interest you in going further to that?
So what we're seeing is that the Wellman gradually talks you through the effects of mass fluoridation as he's operating this device. But if that doesn't put you off, there are further upgrades. Things like magnetization, heavy metal removal, and even alluding to estrogen extraction of all the fads that we have with water. And each of these services are then linked to specific subjects of increasing paranoia and, of course, requiring further listening time. The unit that I created with the Wellman uses active alumina, which is standardized system from any UNICEF projects. And the machine's all made up of products that anyone could just buy from the internet, so any further converted conspiracy theorists could just go home and make their own. So in Wellman Waters, I've used a water filtration service as a platform to create relationships and allow information exchange to occur between the conspiracy theorists and the health-conscious public. The third project, Heathrow Heritage, came about when I found myself in the London airport. What do we do at airports? Unfortunately, we wait. Airports are actually designed to be very passive spaces. Last year, nearly 70 million people passed through London Heathrow Airport with no connection to the spaces surrounding them. So, when I found out that the airport's in the middle of these 12th century historical villages that are under threat from the airport expansion, I got into contact with the local airport activists who protest against this. So on one side, they have this very hostile relationship with the airport, of course, but on the other side, they kind of contribute as citizens by creating things like this free bike repair workshop. And with the input of a couple of local historians and local villagers, we set up this historical village bike tour so that stranded passengers can then enjoy these endangered spaces, and it's run by the activists. The main challenge is to avoid any potential conflict between the activists and the security guards. So the tours would start via the complimentary shuttle bus. It would conveniently take the passengers out of the airport and into the villages, and once there, the activists would lead everyone around the selected sites with the information provided by the historians. So within 45 minutes, you are taken on a journey where Charles Dickens got the name Scrooge, where the late inventor of the English Cock's apple, which is this very famous apple that only the British are obsessed about, and immerse yourself in what was rumoured to be the oldest barn in Europe, before returning back via the complimentary airport bus. So Heathrow Heritage was really an activity where different parties became stakeholders, and the two disparate communities on both sides of the walls of the airport with completely conflicting interests could have an opportunity to form personal bonds using history as a platform. So here in these examples, we've had a chance to witness cat ladies give spa therapies for parasitic infection. We've seen an opportunity for conspiracy theorists to converse with the health-conscious public using by providing a functional service of water filtration. And we've followed along with airport activists as they've peacefully empowered hidden voices by delivering village tours to stranded passengers. Now, what's really important is that both the fringe and the mainstream communities have something really unique to give to each other, and this maintains a mutually beneficial relationship. And I do this using subjects such as parasites, water, and history. And this is what I call platforms of engagement. So at this point, I was pimping myself out to technology conferences. And there, a lot of really, really smart people would refer to this thing called the law of diffusion of innovation. So it basically tells us how people adopt new products. And this is shown kind of clearly by cartoonist Tom Fishburne. So the early adopters are the party guys over on the left, and they're being praised for leaping into new innovations. And the sad dude over on the right, sitting on the sofa by himself, is called a laggard out of pity and despise. So laggards became this kind of dirty name for people being left behind by technology. But I thought, well, there's really an emerging group of people literally being designed out by technology. So I wondered what we could learn from this, and this quest led me to stay in a joystick factory for 6 weeks. For those early adopters out there, joysticks are input devices specially designed for computer games. I thought with all the current studies that we have for the gaming community, there really isn't much known about their maker world. So let's watch a clip from the research.
A joystick, like many other pieces of technology, involves a huge amount of design. A typical joystick factory, such as this one in the suburbs of Shenzhen, produces them. There are a lot more stories hiding behind the walls of this factory than our Western stereotypes of unsafe conditions and financial exploitation. Considering that there are more than 230 million Chinese factory workers, which is about 3/4 of the entire US population, we really ought to know much more about them. To address this, in summer 2011, I came to the city of Shenzhen, the largest manufacturing base in China. I spent time finding out who these factory workers are, how they live, where they sleep, what they eat, and ultimately, why this is important. These joystick makers are migrant workers, which means that they used to be farmers who'd left their lands behind. They could teach us how to grow corn just as well as assemble a joystick.
We tend to be conscious of Chinese factory workers in terms of a working mass. So we often hear about this impressive scale rather than relate to these workers as people. In the media, we discuss when they talk about factory salaries, they're really describing these people in terms of economic value. And from my work with the fringe, I know that focusing on sensationalist extremes makes it really difficult for these workers for us to relate to on a human scale. So I plunged into their mundane events. I slept in their dorms, ate in their canteens, and watched soap opera with them. During the day, the workers would gather their chopsticks to eat together in the factory canteen. The factory I visited had a Sichuan chef, so I don't know if any of you had Sichuan food before. It's pretty spicy. And the chef would receive complaints over and over again for adding too many spices. The girls would protest about its impact on their skin conditions by picking out these mountains of chopped chilies and placing it directly onto the tables. In the evenings, the young workers would hang out in the cheap eateries just outside the factories. And that's when these snack streets would come to life at night, with each noodle maker, hot pot seller, and pharmacist pushing their own television sets out and screening individual channels. So the different crowds would start to gather according to individual viewing preferences. And during the commercial breaks every 12 minutes, everyone would go back to their own businesses, only to recluster to continue with their favorite soaps. At night, the workers would return to sleep in the unisex factory dorms within the only privacy of the mosquito nets. Now, some of these spaces were decorated with spider plants grown in plastic bottles, possibly snuck in by a nostalgic gardener. In the next clip, we'll go through some of the issues that led to the idea of farmification.
A more pressing problem for this joystick factory community, however, is that people don't really buy joysticks anymore. The era of iPhones, iPads, and joystickless games like Kinect sees the end of the peripheral market. These factories are facing difficult decisions, and the workers who'd invested time and energy building relationships will lose their jobs, the roof over their heads, as well as their friends. I began to think about how these communities are created by our Western technological demands, and how design might be used to help these communities remain meaningful when our demands change. And the food question cropped back again. If there are 230 million migrant workers, this means that there are 200 million less farmers. Again, who's making all the food? Back in the joystick factory, I presented to the bosses the dangers in concentrating all the workforce only in manufacturing, and also the alienation of the workers from their countryside origins. I proposed to the bosses that workers be allowed to do part-time farming. The managers liked the idea of a financial buffer in times of difficulty using the lands just down the road. Other factories also became interested and began asking questions. In fact, we even had offers to sell the produces of the part-time farm back to the eateries in the snack street. You could call it a kind of farmification of the manufacturing process. In my month's research year at the joystick factory in Shenzhen, I had the privilege of getting to know the workers and respect their codependence on their community. My observations have resulted in a part-time farming scheme that would allow the migrant workers to gain control over their future lives in relation to their past values. And I've also become aware of the threat to this community each time our eyes glint on the latest tech fad.
So farmification is really a way of using speculative design to give real-life solutions through an exploration of in-depth research into the making world. Now, as I promised at the beginning, I'm going to explain how farmification can be applied further. And I'm going to do this using 3 animals. And also because I read somewhere that looking at cute animals increases people's concentration levels. So I hope this works. Now, when I first proposed farmification, trust me, I was literally laughed out of China. But within half a year, iron factories have started adopting their own farmification by rearing pigs. So this is just some of the media clipping across China about this news. So how did this happen? Well, iron factories had the main supply or main demand from properties, from skyscrapers. But recently, I don't know if you've noticed, there was a slight recession and the property bubble had kind of burst. So these iron factories, that some of them as big as small towns, have started realizing that they no longer have demand. And they're too big to just close down. It would mean kind of, if you're a boss, you know, sacking your mum, your son-in-law, the whole family's family. So this way of farmification really became a practical response as opposed to some design intellectual thought to opt into. But this movement was actually seen with mixed feelings by the Chinese public, who still view agriculture with prejudice. Now, on a personal level, I can totally see how reverting to farming can be really disempowering to the workers. So what are the next stages? Well, it would be about probably integrating this new industrial lifestyle